Chapter 13, A Lot to Learn. Asher's turning 12 party was incredible. Asher's younger sister Bowie greeted everyone at the door with hugs and party hats. Caleb acknowledged that it was great to see Asher and Grace's extended family again. The rooms were alive with balloons and streamers and there was a festive mood. He was very thankful that he now had a weekly schedule which allowed him to enjoy these activities while still knowing that time could be set aside for his important projects. It seemed everyone in their family was eager to see Caleb, as well as meet his cousin Blaze. The more he was engaged in conversation, the more Blaze became the center of attention. Nervously, Caleb watched Blaze fending off questions. Initial questions buzzed about who Blaze's parents were, how they were connected to Caleb, and why they hadn't seen him before. Blaze tried to explain that his father and Caleb's father were brothers who had lost touch with one another years ago. He was trying to keep the circumstances somewhat vague, but he kept getting probing questions. Blaze didn't really want to add too many lies but was beginning to feel somewhat trapped. Caleb looked around pleadingly, desperate for someone to take the hint and change the subject. Grace and Asher's Auntie Nicole seemed to pick up on his anxiety and gamely steered the conversation in a different direction. "It's just great that the cousins can be together now, and we're happy you could join us here today, Blaze. So, let's talk about something else. We do need to make plans for the next camping trip. With the weather improving so much, my thoughts are going to daily nature walks in the forest. Who's with me?" Nicole looked around to a sea of nodding faces and hands raised. Phones were soon out and calendars were being perused. Locations were suggested and discussed. All was well until someone asked about the last week in school, and Asher happily related Blaze's successful experience in their classroom. That led to more questions for Blaze. When Grace and Asher's Auntie Cara discovered that Blaze was enrolled in the scientists in the school's education program at UBC, she eagerly wanted to know more. "What a great program," Auntie Cara commented. "I'm surprised I haven't heard of it." "Well, there are lots of university programs being developed. No one outside the university hears about most of them," Blaze added, feeling quite confident he could keep up the pretense that the program currently existed. "Yes, I understand your comment, but I'm actually at the university. I'm the communications manager for the UBC School of Public Policy and Global Affairs. That's why I'm surprised that I haven't heard of it," Auntie Cara went on. Blaze was silent for a moment. Caleb and Grace were watching him intently. Caleb quietly wondered if Blaze had boxed himself in and his story would be exposed. He would likely be seen as some kind of fraud. To add to their concern, other family members were coming into the room at the time and taking seats, listening to Blaze. Was all Blaze could manage. He seemed to be searching for some way to proceed. Fortunately, the silence came to an end with a loud crash from the kitchen. Blaze was on his feet in an instant, headed out the door to help. "Gus, that's not for you." Alex, Asher's mom, was scolding their cat. "Out of the kitchen. You're going to get your paws sliced open with all that broken glass." Dan, Asher's dad, was the first one to get to the kitchen. Alex, with an exasperated look, motioned to the shattered casserole dish and pointed at the cat. "Gus, you naughty cat," Dan called out, scooping him up, tossing him onto the balcony and closing the screen door. Dan had been barbecuing the salmon that he and Asher had caught the week before. Even though Dan was a very successful businessman with multiple interests, he always put time aside for his family. That was evident in the almost weekly outings that he, Asher, Bowie and Alex participated in. With the barbecue still firing on high, he had to immediately return to finish the cooking. That left Blaze to assist Alex with the glass cleanup. "Thanks so much, Blaze," Alex exclaimed as they worked at clearing up the glass and food bits off the floor. "Fortunately, we have lots of food, so I think we'll survive with one less casserole." There definitely was lots of food. Most of it was a potluck effort. Caleb had been impressed when he had seen the spread. He was definitely pleased he had come to the party. In the middle of the table was a fantastic-looking birthday cake with vanilla and chocolate buttercream icing. Apparently, it was Grammy Rika's famous chocolate pudding layer cake. He could hardly wait. It was certainly opportune that Blaze's sudden departure made him unavailable to continue the conversation from moments before. The fact that he stayed in the kitchen until every possible floor surface had been cleared and scrubbed was noticed by Asher and Grace. "Do you think he's avoiding our families?" Asher asked Grace. "Sure looks that way," Grace responded. Gradually, the family members had moved on. A little later, after dinner, the friends found themselves alone in a quiet spot on the rooftop deck. They were finally away from the other family members. Grace and Caleb had both directed traffic to separate Blaze from the rest of the family, and they had been successful. Asher was relating details of the latest book that Grampy Rick had been working on. The subject and details seemed uncannily similar to their exact situation. Grammy Rika and Grampy Rick were both former school principals who had recently retired. After several years of conducting leadership camps with youth, they were now putting a lot of their learning materials into book form. Asher had found Grampy Rick's latest book quite fascinating. Since the target audience was students entering, or in, high school, Asher had volunteered to read the drafts. It was for that reason that Asher knew all about the project. It seems that Grampy was crafting a science fiction story that involved someone visiting from the future and offering advice to their younger self. As a bonus, the older self was bringing information that was designed to save the world as well. While Asher related the details, Caleb and Grace leaned forward, hanging on every word and glancing nervously around. Blaze was sitting back, smiling. "Can you imagine how weird that would be?" Asher shook his head. "Actually encountering your older self. Wouldn't that be freaky? And how would you be sure it wasn't someone playing a joke on you? Anyways, it seems that the characters in the novel both had some kind of identical scar that convinced the younger self that indeed it was his older self who was visiting him from the future. As a matter of fact, it was a scar like yours, Caleb." Asher's words suddenly trailed off as if something had suddenly occurred to him. He looked toward Caleb, who was acting very strangely, then glanced at Blaze. "You know, a lot of these details make me think of you both," Asher whispered, the color draining from his face. In response, Blaze leaned over and pulled up his pant leg. Asher, who had seen Caleb's scar many times, realized he was looking at an exact match. For emphasis, Caleb pulled his pant leg up to put that exact match on display. Asher looked from Blaze to Caleb to Grace. They were all smiling and nodding. "No way. Not possible." Asher choked. "Possible and real," Grace said. "But how?" Asher stammered. "Don't try to understand it all, or any of it. Just trust us, it's amazing," Grace commented. "Wow, this is crazy. I don't know what to say," Asher breathed. "I think you probably know more than you realize, Asher. Your connection with Grampy Rick has made sure of that. This next part won't make sense to you, but it should to Caleb and Grace. It seems pretty obvious that Grampy Rick has been visited by someone from the future. It wasn't me, but it must be someone who knows our story. My guess is that he was visited, given information and then had an MA applied. He probably doesn't know he was visited, but he has the gut feelings that have led him to construct the story," Blaze concluded. "Wow, that is incredible. You know, I almost said something when you started sharing the learning materials with me, Caleb. They were very similar to the materials that Grampy Rick was describing in his novel. Blaze, I think I do know a lot more about you than I thought. But Grace, how is it that you knew about this and didn't tell me? How long have you known?" Asher had a somewhat wounded look on his face. He was obviously upset at having been left out. Grace was silent for a moment. "Well, a couple of weeks. We weren't sure how to tell you. We didn't want you to think that we had lost our minds." Asher appeared deep in thought before finally appearing to brighten up. "Certainly opens up some pretty incredible possibilities, doesn't it, Asher?" Caleb noted. "Well, yeah, no kidding. Blaze, there is something that I do want to know about," Asher suddenly said. Everyone turned to Asher. Do the Vancouver Canucks win the Stanley Cup anytime soon? Asher, of all the possible questions to come to mind, that can't be the most important. Grace scoffed. Well, maybe not to you. That would definitely be a major interest to some people, myself at the top of the list. And, oh my gosh, this could be revolutionary for my fantasy hockey team. Blaze, do you think if I gave you a list of hockey players, you could get me their stats for the next few years? Asher asked, suddenly becoming very interested in the possibilities that were coming to mind. Well, Asher, let me jump in before you come up with more questions. Blaze responded. Yes, Blaze? Asher asked. They all turned to face Blaze. Your first question. Sadly, the Vancouver Canucks never do win the Stanley Cup. Oh no, Asher cried. Somehow I thought that would be the answer. Now I'm sorry I asked. But don't despair, it's not exactly what you think. You always have to make sure that you're asking the right question when you're seeking to know something. So, the real question you should have asked is this: do the Vancouver Canucks ever become champions in the NHL? Blaze sat back to let that question hang in the air for a moment. I'm confused, Caleb mumbled. Me too, is it some kind of riddle? Asher asked. Or a word puzzle? Grace offered. Word puzzle, perhaps that's the closest. In any case, the answer to the new question is yes. Blaze stated. It was a moment before they all realized that Blaze had just confirmed that the Vancouver Canucks had won the championship. Wait, how can that be? You just told us that they didn't win the Stanley Cup, Asher quizzed. Well, as you can probably tell, having lived through many of the changes with the recent pandemic, along with all the economic, political and social changes, things that you thought would be the same from year to year, suddenly aren't. Blaze explained. So, you have to always be open to possible changes to the way things work. Now, back to the NHL. The Stanley Cup actually gets replaced. It was nothing against the long and respected tradition of the Stanley Cup. It was a desire to add some North American flavor. Well, it was that, along with a multi-million-dollar deal with the Gretzky Foundation. I won't go into details now, but I will tell you that in my time the NHL teams play for the Stanley Cup, and yes, the Vancouver Canucks win it. I won't tell you which year though, that would indeed spoil things for anyone who's a fan. Amazing. Now, what about player stats? Asher inquired. Asher. Grace scolded. No, it's a fair question, Grace, and I have an answer. It's very short. It's no. Blaze emphatically stated. There are some guidelines that have been established for those of us chosen to travel back in time. Some do's and do nots, if you will. If introducing some information from the future is something that will lead solely to personal gain, it's a no. If some information is for the good of the earth and all people, then the answer could possibly be yes, Blaze went on. Now that Asher is part of the team, he'll need to get up to speed with all the parts of Clever Quick. The R is for review and reward, so that should work well, Grace and Caleb. Include Asher in your study group as you watch and follow up with video A13. You'll find it useful to refer to the checklists to make sure all three of you have everything in order, Blaze instructed. Wait, reward? Caleb asked. What do you mean by reward? Do we get something? Well, you obviously know that you're getting many benefits. Many positive things will come your way. You'll feel good about improved marks and positive feedback from teachers, parents, and others. You'll have better balance in your life, increased opportunities, and a widening choice of options for jobs and careers, Blaze added. Beyond that, it can be useful to set up some incentives. These might involve the participation of parents, or just be something you set up yourself. These rewards are not absolutely essential, but they can be helpful and fun to maintain your commitment on a day-to-day basis. Watch for the details in video A13. Also, Caleb and Grace, could you share the other information you have learned about the future? I would, but sadly there is no time now. I'm going to be gone for another week or so, Blaze concluded. Grace interrupted, where are you going this time? You said you'd tell us where you went the other week. I haven't heard a thing. Right, I did say that. I'm sorry I haven't explained things in detail yet, Blaze reflected. I'll have to leave the extended version until I'm back. I promise that I will answer all your questions as well as I can. Once I'm back. The other week, when I was gone, I was connecting with a number of scientists and others around North America. There are a number of people that have been given information about the future, then they have had their memories ghosted with an MA. It was my job to deliver certain trigger words to surface some of the memories so they could be acted on more directly. Among other things, you can probably look forward to some announcements from NASA about upcoming space missions. Now I have to go back to the lab, so it does involve travel back to my time, but I will return, so stay safe and I'll see you all next week. Wait, couldn't you just go and come back in this instant? Doesn't time travel work that way? Asha contemplated. Good question, Asha. I'm not sure I've properly explained that part to any of you, Blaze continued, looking around as Caleb, Grace and Asha all leaned forward in their seats. You see, the time frame of the travel is dictated by the Fibonacci spiraling waves. They have a defined number sequence, as both of you should know. Provided Caleb shared that with you, Grace. Blaze gestured to Caleb and Grace, who was nodding. The Fibo. What? Asha interrupted. Caleb and Grace will explain. In any case, it is exact years that are covered when we jump through time. So, while I am here, experiencing day-to-day life, time is advancing daily in my future as well. It will be roughly the same date, just 8 years from now. You'll experience the passage of a week while you are here, and I will experience the same passage of a week in the future. With adjustments for leap years, I know the date and the month when I return, because it will be roughly the same. Was all Asha could muster. Not known for hiding his feelings, the others could sense that he realized the enormity of the task that lay ahead of him. There was going to be a lot to learn if Asha was going to have any hope to understand what was now happening. As they sat quietly, Caleb's thoughts went to the earthquake preparedness. Perhaps I should ask Blaze about it after all, he silently pondered. While he debated that thought, Blaze interrupted the silence. There is one thing that you'll need to keep in mind for this week, while I'm gone. Don't panic, but there's going to be an earthquake this coming Thursday afternoon. You'll need to keep your knowledge secret, but only until Monday morning. In what will be billed as an unprecedented development, local scientists and government sources will make an announcement predicting the time, place and intensity of the quake. They are going to have what they say is irrefutable proof, provided through some carefully planted data summaries and documents. I'll make sure they get all the information they need to prompt the announcement. When they announce it to the public, they are going to say that there is an 80% chance of accuracy, but actually it's more like 100%. Follow the safety protocols at school and you'll be fine. Stammen Elementary has been fully prepared. The other schools in the lower mainland area will be scrambling, but they will be ready in time. Grace and Asha were shocked. Caleb, not so much. Nonetheless, they were all temporarily speechless, lost in individual thoughts. They were in a somber mood as the get-together came to a close.